black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be speaking to Scott Carpenter, and he is the author of the book, The Nephilim Among Us, and I've been reading it. It's actually a pretty good read. Scott talks about his experiences and his investigation into the Sasquatch subject and how it all started when he was a young boy. He saw one of these creatures come up on his porch. Very, very fascinating account. And Scott really spent, I think it was in 2009, he started really investigating the subject. And he'll be talking about a lot of the weird things that he's run into and then how he came up with the conclusion he thinks Sasquatch is a Nephilim. Very, very fascinating stuff. And it's like I always say, no one has one in their garage they're studying, so no one really knows. But if you get a chance, check out the book. It's called The Nephilim Among Us. You can get it on Amazon, and I'll put links in the show underneath this episode. If you go to sasquatchchronicles.com, or if you're listening on iTunes, just click on the Sasquatch Chronicles logo, and it'll kind of flip over, and you can see the links below. Definitely recommend it, and I want to thank Scott again for coming on. Before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to Eric Burton. Nice guy. He's a fan of mine. I know he's not doing well. He's in the hospital, but he's constantly sending me nice messages, encouraging messages. And here's a guy not doing real well, but he's taking the time to send me nice messages. But here's one of his emails. Wanted to thank you again, Wes, for everything you do. The hospital stay has been extremely, extremely rough for me, and the news I've received hasn't been great. The podcast has helped me so much through this. I also can't wait to get my gift basket from my sister she set up that includes what you sent. I have one question also. Would it be possible for me to come on the show 1 week for just long enough to say hi and thank you and Woody for everything and everyone for everything that they do? I don't know who this Woody character is he's talking about, but I honestly don't know where I'd be without your podcast, keeping me busy while I'm in here. Thank you, Wes. I also hope you're doing good as well. I've been praying for you that you get better ASAP and the pain goes away soon. You're one tough SOB. God bless you, man. So I really appreciate that, Eric. I mean, and you know, Eric sends me nice messages. Actually, you know what? Let's just give him a call. Let's bring him on the air here. Hey, Eric, it's Wes with Sasquatch Chronicles. How are you, man?
Oh crap, my bad. I didn't recognize it was you. That's my fault, man. How are you?
Hey, Eric, let me meet you out real quick. I'm on the air, man. Is it okay if I bring you on the air? Yeah, I'm serious. All right, cool. Well, Eric, thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Hey, man, not a problem. What's good with you?
Oh, not a whole lot, man. Not a whole lot. I appreciate the kind Facebook messages that I get from you, and I know, things haven't been going well for you, and all the kind messages about the show helping you out and just taking your mind off things. And I decided it'd be cool to bring you on the show.
With everything I've been going through, I can honestly say if it wasn't for the show, I mean, I'd probably go insane because there's really not much to do with having Crohn's and everything like that, especially with how severe mine is, as you know.
Yeah.
So just being able to throw that on, I've listened to some episodes probably 5-6 times each just because it keeps my mind off stuff, helps me some nights, helps me, you know what I mean, sleep, just get my mind off everything. There's probably some shows I can quote word for word, but...
Well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And I'm glad it gives you that, it takes your mind off life for a little bit. Sometimes we all need that. We need something to kind of an escape. You know what I mean? I think all of us have an escape, and I'm just glad you listened to the show, man. I really appreciate it. And, all the kind words you give me, I feel like I haven't done much for you, but you do a lot for me. So thank you again.
Hey, man, trust me, you do more than you know. Just having the show as an escape is, and I'm going to get emotional and choked up here, so I'm sorry, but it's just one of those things. Some people have ways to cope with issues, whether it's music, movies, Netflix, podcasts, whatever. And I mean, yeah, I've got music, I've got movies and stuff like that, but you being able to reach out to your fan base, whether, whether they agree with you or disagree or anything like that, just having that as an escape to everything going on currently helps out tremendously, and you have no idea.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, man. And I got your size and I got your address, and I'll send you out. I'll send you out a little care package, something. I know you got out of the hospital today, but I meant to send it to you last week. But either way, I'll send it out. No,
you're fine. You've got stuff going on too with your ribs and everything. How are those doing? That doesn't sound fun at all.
Well, thanks for asking, man. They're doing better. It's still sore. Like everything else in life, it seems like you're never really 100%, in life. Whether that's you're sick.
Anyone who says they're 100% a damn liar.
Yeah, is lying to you. Absolutely. So no matter what, my rib is it'll heal. It's sore. It hurts to talk, hurts to sit up, hurts to, I like to lay on my side when I sleep at night. And sometimes I'll wake up and I'm laying on that, I'm laying right on that rib, and I wake up in pain, but, I'll get over it. It'll pass. It's nothing long term, so it's nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. People ask me how I deal with this, and I'm just like, hey, it'll pass. It could be worse. I mean, there are people out there who have it way worse than I do. And I mean, yeah, it's Crohn's. There's not a cure for it, but I mean, I fight every day. I deal with the pain. We monitor it with pain meds, obviously, and I just take it day by day, and that's about it. I mean, like I said, the last 10 days in the hospital have been hell, but I'm finally out. We've got a good grip on everything. It's just getting more testing done and obviously going from there on how we're going to treat it.
Well, keep your head up, man. The sun will rise tomorrow. Keep your head up.
For sure, definitely.
And, like I said, I just appreciate all the kind words. And, I really do. It really moved me, the fact that the show meant that much to you. It's I have my weeks where I'm like, I'm done doing this. I'm going to go.
I just listening to some of the shows and just like hearing some of obviously the backlash you get. I don't know how you do it. I mean, I honestly would probably snap and be done by now. And you take it in stride. You deal with the idiots and everything like that, and just keep on moving. And I mean, like I said, it helps more than you know. A lot of people are like, oh, it's a podcast about Sasquatch and if it's real or not. To me, as long as it's helping me or other people in general, I mean, there are probably plenty of other people like in the Facebook group who it helps just as much. And it's just something that is fascinating. And what if, whether you believe it or not, whether you've had your own encounter or not, it's still just one of those things, and like I said, it does tremendously help me get through some days where it's just hard. And like, that's why I'm kind of glad, I think, because I found you through Jericho's podcast, and just from then on out, it's just been one of those things where I caught up on it. I went back and everything like that just to get back on it from the start all the way up till now. I'm caught up. I've heard every episode, and there are some days where I'll just be in bed in pain, and I'll just pop on, whether it's my iPhone, my Apple TV, or whatever, just pop on the podcast app and just let it play all day. And just have that going on in the background kind of as just like something to keep my mind off stuff.
Thank you for that. Thank you for all the kind words. And what got you interested in Bigfoot? Was it just a Jericho podcast? You thought he'd check it out, or have you?
I've always kind of just had that thing of, like, you know what I mean, just growing up and obviously everything like that. And it wasn't really just his podcast got me introduced to you, but I've always wondered, like, way before then, you know what I mean? Just reading other stories, just because just the stuff I'm into, and just reading other stories is like, well, I haven't encountered anything, obviously, because the part of Indiana I'm in, I highly doubt, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I don't know, so it's just one of those things. There are so many things out there that we don't know if are real or if it's just we're batshit insane, or, you know what I mean? It just really depends on who you talk to.
I understand. Well, you know,
and some of the stories too is just like there's no other explanation, in my opinion. Where I've heard stories from like you or people who have been on the show where it's just like there's no other explanation. Then what else could it be? Is it? There's no way a gorilla just escaped from the zoo out of nowhere in this part of the country, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just try and put that together for me, and then come back and talk to me when you've got it figured out. And it's just one of those things is we're never going to really know unless we dig into it more. Like you said, we get more information that's 100% obvious. But it's just something that I kind of got interested in, that I've always been interested in growing up. And then it just kind of built up more and more. And then when I heard your story on his podcast, I dug deeper into it. You know what I mean? Just looking at it more, watching, like listening to the show and everything like that. So.
No, I appreciate it, man. And you'll have to, you know, not that you can work on your health. You know, I'm always, in situations like this, I always end up putting my foot in my mouth, so you'll have to forgive me. But, you know, I want you to get better, and I want you to uplift you some. And so I'll send you out a little care package. Not that you'll need a sweatshirt this time of year. I would imagine that, you know, it's probably the last thing you'll put on. But I'll send you out some nice stuff. And just as my way of saying thank you for all the nice, you know, it's people tend to forget I'm human too. You know, it's the bad comments hit me just as hard as, you know, if someone was saying it to you, and, you know, the good comments are just as nice to get, you know, and so I really appreciate it, man. I think you uplifted me more than I uplifted you, and I'll send it out to you as my way of saying thank you. And, you know, if you ever find yourself back in the hospital, at least that sweatshirt and some things will hopefully cheer you up. I feel like that's the wrong thing to say, but, you know, I hope it cheers you up. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the show, man. I really do appreciate it. And you didn't have to send me all the nice comments and stuff, but I did appreciate them, and I wanted to bring you on the air just as my way of saying thank you. And that's it, man. Thank you so much for listening. I'm glad to hear you're out of the hospital. You feeling better now?
Yeah, I'm getting there for sure.
Yeah. Well, feeling better than before you went in the hospital, I mean.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I know it's late. I'm sorry to call you so late, but I promised I would.
No, dude, not a problem at all.
Well, thank you, brother.
Not a problem, man. And like I said, I'll keep you in the loop with everything that's going on and everything like that. And again, just thank you for everything that you do through the podcast.
Thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out the website, sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Scott Carpenter to the show. And Scott is the author of Nephilim Among Us, The Identity and Origin of Sasquatch and Other Mysterious Creatures. And I know you can get it on Amazon. Scott, where else can people pick up your book at?
They can get the ebook version on Sellfy. It would be sellfy.com/Scott Carpenter, SCOTTCARPNTER. They can. There's also links on the Nephilim Among Us blog site and on my Bigfoot Field Journal site.
And I'll include links to those here on the show. Before we get into some of your theories and stuff, Scott, because I know you and I talked the other night, and it was a very fascinating conversation for me because there's not a lot of people I can sit down and have that conversation with. So I really did enjoy speaking with you. But all of this kind of, your whole journey as far as looking into the Sasquatch subject started with an encounter when you were really young. If you would, for the audience, would you mind telling us that story? Tell us what happened and what were you doing? What did you see? Kind of walk us into it, would you?
Sure. This happened back when I was a boy. I grew up in East Tennessee in a rural area. We lived on a dead-end street. In fact, at that time, it was just gravel. It was gravel. There were 3 houses at the end of a dead-end street surrounded by small farms, in a very rural area. It was in the summer. I was somewhere 10, 11, 12, probably 10 or 11-ish. And Johnny Carson was just coming on. The news was just going off. And my dad worked shift work, and I was the oldest of 3, and I'd stayed up with Mom. And we have the den is a rectangle shape. So at one end, we're on the couch. At the other end is the TV, and then beside the TV is the door that goes out on the back porch. Mom said, I'm going to take the garbage out, and I'll be back in just a minute. And so, I'm still sitting there on the couch. Mom gets the garbage. She goes out the back door and off the porch. She turns the light on the back porch, and she leaves the door open. We have a glass door, of course. And back in those days, you had, you used to use 50-gallon drums, and put those, at the back of your lot, and the trash collector would literally pull up and drive in the back of your yard with a little truck, and collect your trash. That's back to the good old days. And so Mama had gone back there, and Mom hadn't been off the porch very long, and all of a sudden these 2 little monkey-looking like creatures ran up on the back porch, and pressed their little faces up against the glass door with their hands over their heads, and just pressed their noses against the glass and just looked in at me. And it literally scared me to death. I didn't know what I was looking at. I mean, my heart was racing, and I literally was just frozen. And as I'm looking at them, I'm literally just petrified. And I'm looking at them, they're looking at me, and then they kind of look at each other and look back at me and smile. And then about that time, you can hear the lid it's a 50-gallon drum with the lid, and Mom she drops the lid pretty hard so it'll seal back shut. And when they hear that, they both jerk their heads to the left, and then they turn quickly, and then they dash off the back porch. I'm still sitting there, just taken aback. Real quick, in between the time that when they kind of back up a little bit, there was just a moment when after they looked at each other, they looked back at me and they smiled at me. Where some people have said, well, no, they bared their teeth. It looked like a smile to me, okay? They looked like they smiled at me. But anyway, that kind of did ease my fear. I don't know, something about them smiling kind of made me feel a little better before, they ran off. But they ran off the back porch. Well, when Mom came up and in the house, and she's sitting there and she kind of looks at me, and I'm like, Mom, did you see those monkeys on the back porch? And she looked at me and she says, what? She said, did you see those 2 little monkeys? 2 monkeys ran up on the back porch, Mom. And she's like, I didn't see anything out there. Maybe that was our neighbors, Chucky and Charlotte, playing a prank on you. She said, the only thing going on outside is, it smells like there's a skunk or something running around. And I said, and with that, I just kind of let it go. Of course, I knew it wasn't my neighbors. My neighbors were both blonde-headed and blue-eyed, so I think I know the difference between my neighbors running around at 11:30 at night and 2 monkeys. But that was my first exposure, and it gave me a lot of trouble. I had nightmares for a long time, and trying to figure out, what I actually, saw. Was it, because were they aliens? Were they monkeys? I didn't know what Bigfoot was. I didn't have any clue. And finally, later in life, in my probably early 20s, you know, I used to like to watch In Search of and stuff, and some of those shows, and they actually had this Bigfoot show where someone was describing, and I saw a sketch of an infant Bigfoot, and it was like, that's what I saw, you know. And after that, things got better. You know, once I was able to identify and say, okay, that's what I saw, the nightmares stopped. But I had nightmares all the way through my teens and you know, into my early 20s until I kind of was able to come to grips with what I'd seen. And people ask me, you know, they kind of were like orangutan looking. I mean, their hair was all disheveled and just a mess. But they didn't have any hair on their faces, but they had human noses. They didn't have a monkey-like nose. It was like, you know, of course, their nose, you know, they had their nose pressed up against, but it looked like it was a flat, wide nose. And then they had really wide mouths, and their teeth were just block square and, you know, just pearly white. And of course, it could have been a part of the light shining down and made the teeth look so white, but, you know, and, you know, they had, the rest of their bodies were just, you know, have you ever seen a orangutan run with its hands over its head? That's how they ran off the back porch when the lid made the noise and they turned, instead of putting their hands down, they just left their hands above their head and ran off the porch. And it looked kind of funny.
Yeah, that's strange. So, that's very strange.
Yeah, so that was my first quote encounter, which I really didn't tie to being a Bigfoot encounter till later in life.
Yeah, I would imagine, because, you know, what reference point do you really have at that age? I wanted to ask you, how big were they compared to you? You're what, 10, 11, 12, or 10, 11 years old, right around there? Yeah, one of them was probably 4.5 feet, and the other one was probably 4. I mean, you know, on a screen door, you've got, you know, 2 windows, you know, a lower and an upper, and one of them's head was clearly above that, which would probably be around 4.5, and the other one was about half a head smaller. So I'd say about 4.5, no more than 4.5 feet tall was the tallest one. And I mean, they were, you know, infants. They weren't like husky built, you know what I'm saying? They were just slender little monkeys. Yeah, and that's a fascinating encounter. It makes you wonder if they'd been watching that back door, or why do you think they ran up on the porch?
You know, that's a good clue. I don't have an idea. I don't know why they, you know, whether they knew we were in there. They've been watching during the day. I don't have any memories of the day of anything strange going on or anything like that. I mean, we were in a rural area. I mean, during the summer, literally when summer started, I kicked my shoes off and, you know, we were running wild. You know, Mama kicked us out of the house at 8 o'clock in the morning. We didn't come back in the house till night. So, you know, we're always running around and playing and you know, running around the woods, jumping in the pond, riding bikes. So, you know, I don't know if during the day, you know, they were passing through, saw us, and kind of got interested in us. I don't know. You know, for whatever reason, they decided to take you know, maybe they didn't even know I was in there and were just curious what was in the house. And when they saw Mom come out, they thought, let's go look, you know. And who knows?
Yeah, it's a fascinating account, though. I wanted to ask you, your mom came back in and she said that there was a smell outside, like a skunk?
Yeah, that was kind of a clue later on, you know, when you learn about what Bigfoot smell like. She said that, you know, she made a point to say that it smelled bad outside. It smelled like there had been a skunk, you know, and we have skunk, you know, it's rural area, you know, skunks, possums, you know, the whole gambit. But, you know, she said there must be a skunk, and, you know, I could smell it. So obviously, you know, if you draw, you know, the obvious conclusion, they had left a, you know, pretty bad little odor back there, and that's what she was smelling.
Did the creatures vocalize, or did they do anything else besides look at you and smile?
They just looked. I mean, you know, it was like two curious children. I mean, when they first, you know, the movement, I guess, I wasn't watching the door. I was kind of still watching the TV. You know, Johnny Carson's coming on until 11:30, and in the East Coast, you know, that's what time he comes on. And I just, you know, there was movement, and I looked up, and there they were. You know, it was almost like, I don't know, to be honest with you, I didn't see them run up. It was like the movement of them actually getting in place caught my attention. So when I looked up, they were already in place, so to speak. They already were, you know, they literally were pressing their noses against the window. You know, like a child would, anybody would pressing in, looking in a window, and their noses, you could see the end of their noses were mashing flat on the window. Their looks at first were just deadpan. They weren't, menacing or anything. They just didn't have an expression at all, other than they were just staring at me. And then, they paused and looked at each other, then looked back at me, and then they smiled.
I wanted to ask you, so years later, did you ever go back and ask your mom, was there anything strange going on around the property, as you got older?
No, I mean, to be honest, that was the only, quote, strange thing that ever happened, or any clue that there was anything strange going on around our house. I mean, it was broken woodlots. There wasn't we weren't we were, the only tie to anything you could say was, where we were, where our house was located, was obviously on an Indian encampment. We were on a little hill, and there was 2 natural springs that ran year round. By the time we moved there, they capped the springs, but at one time they ran constantly. So, but every time we plow the garden or dig any hole of any significance, we'd come up with, we wouldn't tell anybody, but we'd always keep it to ourselves, but we'd come up with arrowheads and, small artifacts like that. So, I know that we were in a traditional area, obviously, where the Cherokee at one time had a small village or some sort of encampment. But, there really, there's, 5 acres here and then 50 acres of field, 75 acres of woods here. It was just a broken deal. So there wasn't anything really that close and nothing really strange. And I did, the only time my mom really ever found out about that was when I put that encounter in the first book I did. I wrote it called the Bigfoot Field Journal, which is more like a journal than a book, where I just kind of every time I went, I just kind of laid out what happened, and then I put it in a book. And Mom read that, and she said, I don't know. She said, well, I don't remember that. She said, I don't, she didn't even remember it happening. So, I mean, she remembers us doing the Johnny Carson thing and on many a nights, but she said to her it was just another night, and she said, to be honest, she said, I don't remember it. So.
And so was it many years later that you had an encounter, and is that why you started looking into this? Or at what point in your life did you go, hey, I'm going to devote some time and actually look into this Sasquatch phenomenon that people are seeing? Obviously you had seen it when you were younger, but at what point in your life did you decide I'm going to dedicate some time to this?
It was in 2009. I had a job at the time where I was doing tech support, and I had an office where I was basically by myself. I mean, I had to go out to different offices, but my main office where I reported to work, and usually spent some time was with the computers in an office. It's just me, myself, and I. So during my lunch hour, I had begun to watch videos, and I watched football and hunting videos, and I had stumbled upon some of these Bigfoot videos, these Bigfoot researchers, and a couple of them, it showed these guys were whooping and trying to get responses from whooping, and along other things, to tree knots and the yelling and all that. So, I watched them, and I kind of half took it seriously. I thought it was kind of, it's kind of comical. Some of them are funny to watch. Some of them are interesting, but, for the most part, it was just something to do. So, later that spring or that year, I can't remember, it's probably June, I think, I'm fishing, and I'm fishing on this, around this area that's a 1,500 acre area. It's a recreational area, multi-use. You can hunt and camp on it, ride horseback, but it's not a motorized vehicle only. The only way you can go in this is either on foot or on horseback. So I'm fishing. It's early morning. It's sun's just coming up. It's a real nice morning. I'm throwing topwater lures on this point, and I just how the mood hit me. I don't know why. I come over to how you do silly things. For some reason, I decided I'd do some whoops just for kicks and giggles. And I've whooped 3 or 4 times. Probably weren't very good whoops. I don't think they were. I might have got the last couple sounding like something. And then, you know, and I kind of sheepishly thought, God, I hope no one heard that, because you know how if you've got a calm water and a wood line, you know, yell or something, it echoes, you know. So, you know, it's echoing down the lake, and I'm thinking, oh, God, I hope nobody heard that, you know. And it sounded like a fool. So anyway, so I go back to fishing. It probably been not very long, 3 or 4 more casts, and all of a sudden I heard just you could hear it in the distance coming, and it was, you know, just you know, something was just making a lot of noise, you know, crashing and just coming, you know, breaking limbs, and it was coming towards. So it's coming and getting closer. And, you know, it's getting my attention, you know, and I'm kind of racking my brain on what in the world's going on here. It's you know, I know what a horse sounds like going through the woods, and this point is just, I mean, it's extremely thick. It's full of, you know, it's overgrown with briars. It's not, there's no horse trails that come down to it or even near it, you know, and it's kind of isolated on the end of a point on this peninsula anyway. So, you know, something's coming, you know, and so I just kind of just freeze and I'm sitting there in the boat, you know, just watching. And this thing comes all the way down to the, you know, to almost out to where I can see it, but it's just, as the, you know, the sun's coming up and it's casting some pretty dark shadows. So, you know, you just got breaks of light going back into the woods, and all I could see was just movement, you know, something moving. And you could hear it. It was bipedal. It wasn't on 4 legs, and it was just going up and down around this point. You know, it would go about 15, 20 yards to one way and then back, and you know, just raising sand. You know, and then after it goes, you know, back and forth a couple times, it just stops and it kind of gets quiet for a minute. And by that time, I'm like, you know, I don't know what it is, but I know I'm too close to the bank, so I'm hitting the trolling motor. I'm making a little bit of noise now, and I still haven't retrieved my lure. It's still sitting in the water, so I'm backing off the point a little bit, getting a little bit of this distance, and then I heard it probably 2 or 3 times, just you know, just like a big sigh, but more of a hump, and maybe 2 or 3 of those, and then it slowly, you know, just started walking back up in the woods. It, you know, it wasn't raising cane now; it was just walking. And you just hear the bipedal walks, you know, crunch, 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 and till it just faded away. And I mean, I've been sitting in the boat, I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what to think. I'm like, what in the world, you know? My first thought was surely to God that some stupid fool is not going to get this sort of reaction, you know?
Right.
You know, I was just like this.
Be careful.
You know,
be careful what you wish for, I guess, you know, because it might just happen.
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't my intention. I was just being silly. I'm being honest. I was just being silly. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And so anyway, so, you know, that I'm, you know, and like anybody else, I'm like, man, I've got to go in there and see what the heck is going on. So a week later, you know, of course, after that, the whole week up to that, I really, you know, kind of do some more heavy research in the Bigfoot research and what it's all about. So I had at the time I had a Sony Handycam, you know, we bought, you know, to do Christmases and all, you know, do the family with. So I grabbed that and put on my, you know, my hunting gear and you know, into the woods I go. And that's how it all got started.
And what was your mindset going into it? What did you think you were chasing?
Well, when I started out, you know, I thought that I was going to be a big, if there was a Bigfoot, it was you know, some sort of bipedal ape, some sort of big, large bipedal ape. And that's what I'd be looking for. That's it. You know, that's exactly what I expected. I expected an animal. And so when I first started my research, that's the mindset I had, that I'm dealing with an animal that may be, you know, a smart ape, more, you know, a little bit more intelligent than your average, you know, animal. But when I first started researching, you know, I was setting the stuff up like I was setting up my cameras and stuff to get, you know, take pictures of deer. You know, I had no clue. You know, I was literally clueless of what I was really getting into or what I was dealing with. You know, I was just stumbling around, you know, trying to get pictures, trying to research this thing, you know, and try to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, and I think that's important to state because, you know, if you and I would have talked back a couple of years ago, I would have probably said you're nuts. It's nothing more than an ape, based on conversations you and I have had now. But if you take a serious look into the subject, there's something more going on here than just it's a simple ape. It just is. I would love to say otherwise. I would love to be wrong on this. I don't think I am. But I would love to be absolutely wrong in this situation and say it's nothing more than an ape. But they are very physical. I mean, what came up on your porch that night was very physical. It was a very physical creature, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there wasn't a ghost, or at the time it didn't appear to be anything supernatural. And definitely on that point, there wasn't anything supernatural about, what was making all that racket.
Yeah.
There was obviously something in the woods, and I could see movement. And it was, noise, and it was walking, and it was breaking limbs, and just throwing a fit, for the lack of a better word. So, there was no clue early on that what I was dealing with wasn't corporal and wasn't no more than just a big smart ape.
It gets frustrating after a while. Before we get into the mindset of where you were changing your ideas on what you were chasing, prior to that, isn't there kind of this, don't you get frustrated? Wasn't there a time period, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself and I should speak for myself only, but after a while you feel like you're chasing a ghost. I mean, you feel like you are, I'm not saying Sasquatch is a ghost, but you feel like you're chasing a ghost after so many years of being in it. It's like, God, why can't we get this? Why can't we get this evidence or that evidence? Or why can't someone just put a bullet in one and drag it in? And so after a while, it kind of starts to feel like you're chasing a ghost. But were they ever aggressive with you when you were out there trying to find them?
Well, early on in the research, it started getting, I can kind of relate to that, because it's like they would always do stuff. It was almost like and I put it in my book as one of the rules, but they always would do stuff that I would know was done. But if anyone else looked at that, they'd say that was a coincidence, that was a squirrel, that was something. But it was just enough for you to know, hang on a second, that's not right. Something happened here. This rock, one of the things they used to do was very frustrating. I set these rocks out on this slab of on this little slab rock, and a slab of marble. Actually, it's a piece of marble. They actually put it there. But anyway, and I'd lay rocks in different patterns and see if they'd mess with them. And they would mess with them, but it wouldn't be hardly enough for you to say, oh, an animal. It always left the doubt that someone could say, well, an animal did that. But one of the most interesting things they did is I would, of course, take real detailed pictures. And it took me about 2 times to notice, because I'd, take my pictures, go back a week later on the next weekend, take more video, and look, well, they didn't move the rocks. Well, then, I don't know, but on one of them, for some reason, I noticed that one of the rocks had like a nick in it. Well, the rock was in the same position as far as where it was on the marble slab, but it was turned 180 degrees the other way. And I started looking, and every rock had been turned 180 degrees. And you're thinking, now, come on. A raccoon, a squirrel, or whatever is not going to meticulously sit there and turn every rock exactly 180 degrees. Leave it in the same position and turn it 180 degrees. So that was kind of the stuff they would do that would lead me, like you're talking about. I'm chasing a ghost here. That they'll do things that I know, something of intelligence did. But if I put this in a video, or if I tell a friend, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. And these little things like this, that's what really frustrated me. And like you say, one time there was a mock charge. I didn't even know what a mock charge was, okay? And I'm at the feeding station getting the camera down, and I hear a rush. It's like a bull rush. Something, it was rushing me, and it's coming, through the bushes. The bushes and everything are moving, and I spin the camera around, and I'm not armed, and I'm like, oh shit, it's it, I'm either going to, something's getting ready to happen bad, And so I turned the camera around, and it's like right before it came out in the open, this dead stop, silence. And, nothing. I go over there, I can't find footprints. I can find some disturbed, some broken foliage and the leaf litter's disturbed, but there's nothing definitive to say, that was, no more than my imagination, so to speak. And so these sort of things happen, and it really was frustrating.
Yeah, I bet. Especially when nothing's there, and when you're being charged, I mean, that's a little unnerving, especially when you spin around, there's nothing there. It's kind of like what you're talking about with the rocks. I had Rich on, who was an ex-police officer on a couple weeks ago, and over there at the Harstein Island in Washington State, and he was talking about that. He said they would take like dolls. He would leave out dolls for them, and he never saw them take them. But here's the interesting part. He said it would show back up again, weathered and worn in the exact same spot he left it, but 2 months later, all of a sudden it shows back up like something brought it back. And that's just weird. It's just odd that, that kind of stuff. You can't say, well, that was Sasquatch, but, what else is it? I mean, where do you place that? Where do you put that? As far as you have someone tell you something like that. It wasn't just Rich and you. I've had other people tell me that, where they'll leave stuff out for them. It'll be taken, like toys and whatnot, and then it'll come back. And there's really no reason for it coming back. But not only does it come back, they put it in the exact same spot that you left it a month or two earlier. And so it makes you wonder what is going on with this. Sure. What's kind of some of the weird things that started happening to where you started thinking, okay, I don't think this is an ape anymore. Yeah. Well, beyond the rocks.
Yeah, beyond the rocks. Well, it was like a gradual crescendo. In other words, it just kind of like this built on top of this and that built on top of this. I mean, the first thing that really, other than the mock charge and then nothing there, was the use of language. They finally moved the rocks into a pattern. I mean, I put a smiley face on a flat piece of rock, and it would change into this pattern of a C, and above the C was another rock. And at first, I oh, that's weird. But then I had remembered an interview a lady did and said that that they were using what's that language? Phonetic language. It's syllabics. And Indians use syllabics. Many tribes used syllabics to communicate. It basically each symbol represents a sound, and you put the sounds together to make words. It's phonetic, and so it was a syllabic symbol. Then when I looked it up, if I translated it a couple different ways, it's Cree. If I can't use Cree and Cherokee and use the sounds and use it formed a word like vata or wata, and then when you look that up, that means come visit brother, come visit friend. So that was kind of my first clue. Here's possibly the use of language. And so they made a couple symbols like that. And then I started, it's hard to explain because it was just one thing after another, just those odd things like that. I mean, they began to show up at my house. And that was the next, that was the next big step of something's going on here that's strange. And I really, no one had told me among Bigfoot researchers, if you get a bunch of them together, pretty much if they've been doing it for more than a few years, the Bigfoot show up at their house. It's just the way it is. Now, some won't admit it, but, it's pretty much a universal thing. No matter whether you live in the city, the county, a big town, small town, they will show up at your house.
Before you jump into that, let's back up with the language. Did you hear them speak this, or?
Did I hear them speak it? No, I never heard them speak the language. They just made the symbols with the rocks.
Oh, I got you.
Now, I learned a little bit of Cherokee, and I would try to go out in the woods and speak, and I experimented with speaking. I even experimented with sign language, because, I read accounts where, deaf child was signing into the woods, and the father said, "What were you doing?" And I was talking to the big hairy man, using sign language, and he was talking back. So I kind of after the rock thing, I just started to experiment with different forms of communications. They've never really taught. I mean, other than talking in their language, me hearing the gibberish, the samurai chatter, and the mumbling, they yelled at me and David Pilates one time, and it was actually, we thought they were yelling at us, but Scott Nelson said no, they're probably yelling at each other. They were having a disagreement about something about to do with us. And I heard one word one time, one yelled Jericho, but other than that, that's really the only verbal things I've heard from them, other than the whoops, the occasional whoop and occasional jaw pop, something like that.
And the language that you and David heard, was it like the Sierra sounds, or was it similar?
Yeah, it was similar to Sierra sounds, and I've got the breakdown in the book, and I've actually got the recording on my blog site. But yeah, it was a very short, la 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 yada la, stuff like, and nonsensical as far as other than they were yelling. But when Scott Nelson, he said there were definitely phonetics being spoken, a language being spoken. He said there were two individuals. We thought there was just one. He said no, there were two, and he said it was like they were, yelling at each other over something. And it may have been how to respond to us, because we were walking up a trail. David, it's the first time he'd been in the area, so he was a stranger to him. It seems like sometimes in certain my research areas, if I bring a stranger in, it would agitate them. This is the first time they've yelled, but they would do other things to kind of to show their displeasure, maybe stomp the ground or throw rocks or break sticks, that sort of thing.
Did you ever get a feeling like they might harm you being out there?
There were a few times I was scared. I don't know if I'd say that I actually felt they were going to harm me, but there were a few times, because I did this alone, which I don't recommend. And there were a couple of occasions where one encounter they surrounded me, except they made a semicircle around me and were making noises and doing stuff all the way around me except for the way out. And it and as time went on, they got louder and louder. So it was obvious they wanted me to leave. That was a really bad time, and just scared me. And I had one encounter where they just blanked my memory out, and after seeing the video, the memory came back. But it was one of those deals where they just blanked my memory out. But that scared me afterwards, just because the weirdest thing in the world is watch yourself on video and not remember it. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're watching yourself, but it's not you. And it was weird. That was a very weird experience.
Well, tell me about that. There's a guy I talked to one time, and I don't know if this is similar to what you experienced. I had him on the show. He had run into, it was Jonathan Odom. He ran into a Dogman, and it kind of sounded like he was describing a skyquake. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a skyquake. It's like an earthquake, but it happens in the air. And he was kind of describing this skyquake, and he couldn't remember where he was at, couldn't remember really where he had gone, and he was really disoriented. And he had been in there, I think, for, I don't remember, it was something like 3 or 4 hours. And in his mind, only like 10 minutes had passed by, but it was a very odd, strange encounter. Was it something similar to that?
I guess you could say, well, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything when it was happening. Let me say that. It was a situation where there was in the research area near my feeding station, the trail went out to the end of the point of land, and the trail ended. And then there was a roadbed that was submerged. Kind of get this in your head. And then across that roadbed, normal size 2-lane roadbed, they had like a foot of water on top of it. And then there was a small island. And the island was covered in ivy and stuff like that. At one time, this had been a ferry crossing, and I think the ferry station part had been on that island, and so that's where the ivy had come from. But it looked like a place, boy, that'd be a perfect place to lay down. And so I'd always go out and look over to this island. Well, what happened was, the last memory I have is I'm leaving the feeding station, and I think I turned left and go back towards the main trail, go back up the main trail back into the mainland part. What really happened was I turned to the right. I go down to the end of the where the road ends, and I'm standing there, and I'm zooming. I've got my camera, and I'm just kind of zooming in and out. I'm searching for things, looking into the foliage. Well, I spot something, and this is what the footage it's called. I call it the sneering Bigfoot, because I find something on the camera, and I zoom in and out on it 2 or 3 times, and it's with the automatic zoom camera, and it's leaning around a tree, and there's foliage, the wind's blowing. You zoom in and get out of focus. I zoom back a little bit. So it's obviously I see something. It's obvious. I'm trying my best to focus in on it. And then all of a sudden, I don't say anything on the video. I don't speak. But after, it looks like I'm trying to zoom in on this thing, I just zoom the camera back. I calmly turn around, and I calmly walk off. And it's all on video, but I don't remember any of it. I think I turned left, and the next, and it's probably, this whole thing probably lasted 5-7 minutes, and then my next cognitive memory is heading up the trail going in, past the area where I turned to the right. You can see this thing, it looks like it's sneering, and it sneers, and then eventually shuts its mouth. It was my theory that it used infrasound on me of some way, and it's in the book. The camera I was using had a sensitive enough microphone that it was able to get those lower frequency sounds, and then I used some freeware to look at the infrasound at the different amplitudes, and it was measurable that when I turned to the right from the feed station, went down, the amplitude started going up and up and up and up. And it was like it was, and the weird thing was, it was like it was modulating. Like he knew what frequencies to throw out. And basically, blank my memory, put this, and had me walk away. And then, of course, on the camera, on the audio from the video, you can kind of watch the amplitudes of the lower frequencies. As I get further away, they go back down to, basically normal levels. But during one time, they were pretty darn high. And so at that time, that's when I kind of was really looking heavily into infrasound as possibly being, one of the things they use to affect a person. But yeah, it was a very strange thing. And that's the, like I said, it was weird looking at the video, seeing myself and doing stuff that I don't remember doing.
Yeah, no, I bet. And the book, again, is called The Nephilim Among Us, The Identity and Origin of Sasquatch and Other Mystery Creatures. Scott, do you think if the guy telling the story right now could go back and talk to the guy who thought he was chasing an ape, do you think the Scott Carpenter that was looking for an ape would look at this Scott Carpenter and go, this guy's nuts?
He might, or he might just say, "Hey, buddy, just go fishing. just go back fishing. Go, find you another hobby.
Let's go get a rum and coke at the bar."
Don't waste it. And I'm not saying it was a waste, but don't waste the next 6-7 years of your life, chasing this ghost.
No, I understand.
I would have probably thought I was a little off. Yeah, because at that time, I knew they were smart apes, and I don't even know if in the research world, if anyone had, I know there were other people that thought that they were the Nephilim, or they might have supernatural abilities, but those people were on the fringe and they weren't part of the quote mainstream. So I just really didn't pay that much attention to it at that time.
No, I understand it, and that's why I wanted to ask you, is because. So people understand where you came from and where you got to this point. And there's no wrong answer, with regard to how we feel about Sasquatch. There's really no, and I would try and tell people this, whether it's you believe it's a Nephilim, or you think it's an ape, or you think it's an alien, until someone has one in a cage that we get to study, no one truly knows. But there's a lot of weird things that go on with the subject. And I think a lot of researchers, if you ask them privately, they will tell you, yes, there's a lot of weird things that go on. Publicly, they'll say something else, but privately, they'll tell you, yes, there's something weird that is going on with this. You mentioned earlier they follow you home. Tell us about that.
Sure. For whatever reason, well, I think I know the reason now, but at the time, didn't really have a clue how they found me. But later, tied it to the supernatural and those people that quote go ghost hunting and, you know, have the issue of the entities coming on with them. But basically what happened was at my residence, footprints started showing up, and it was just like one single footprint. There was an incident where they took a rod, they actually robbed a robin's nest of its eggs and left the evidence on the side of the house, on the side of my house. There was, I've got aluminum siding, and it's got red paint, and the red paint's kind of oxidizing. And one good thing about oxidizing paint, it leaves real good impressions. I mean, there's a shoulder impression, a handprint, and scuff marks where it looks like one got on the top of the other's shoulder. And, you know, they got their eggs out of the nest. And so you know, that started happening. There were slaps on the side of the house. My wife at the time actually saw one evening, and then the next thing that started happening is the neighbors started seeing them. You know, I never, you know, that's the sad part. Except for one brief instant, one time, I never got to see them at the house. You know, everybody else did but me. But and then the other thing they started doing was the little dog food trick they do, and we had at the time we had several large dogs in the backyard. We had fence in the backyard. We had a golden retriever, a chow. We're staying out back, and so we kept the dog food in a tub, well, airtight tubs, you know, snap tubs on the back porch. And my wife was the one that fed them, and, you know, she kind of knew her little schedule, how much food they'd eat. And that first winter they started visiting, she, you know, and we didn't have any clue what was going on. She's like, something's wrong. And I said, what do you mean something's wrong? She said, I know how much I'm feeding these dogs, but the dog food's just, I mean, we're going through it. You know, a bag ought to last 6 weeks, and it's only lasting 3 or 4. You know, sometimes not, you know, 3. And she said, something's wrong, and I don't know what's going on. I said, well, our dogs are very territorial. You know, if a person jumped in the backyard they didn't know, they'd lose their minds. And so, you know, and we had privacy fence for the neighbor directly behind us, so we're kind of like, what, you know, he would take dog food. So I said, well, let's try this. So went out there in the evening, and I took a pencil, and I drew a line on the inside of the tub. It's, you know, with the dog food, and leveled the dog food out. And the next morning, I go out there, and the dog food level is down about 2 inches, but the lid snapped back. The dogs have not didn't bark or go crazy, and the dog food is level. And I'm like, what in the world? And it took a couple of times, but I finally figured out the little scutters were coming into the backyard on a semi-regular schedule, getting the dog food out of the tub, eating it, leveling it back out, and then putting the lid back on. And you know, finally was able to get some fingerprints on top of the tub. I actually put a DVR. I put cameras out. Every time I tried any technology, it was just thwarted. The cameras be laid down. They had whiteouts. They malfunction. I put a camera inside the tub. That didn't work. I mean, you know, but for whatever reason, I put a digital voice recorder. It was voice activated, and I put it in the grill. The grill had a little side burner, had a lid on it. And so I put it in that side burner, and I put the lid down on it. Well, started getting recordings of, you could hear them unsnap the lid. You could hear them, sometimes you could hear them actually crunching the food. You'd hear the dogs greet them. You know, if you've ever had dogs, you know the noise of a dog, like you could hear the dog come up on the deck, and you'd hear a happy, you'd hear all that, like it was greeting someone at 3 a.m. So they obviously had befriended our animals, and our animals were happy with them. And so, you know, that was odd, hearing our dogs, you know, being friendly. And then we'd hear other racket. They would fight. They seemed very curious. They'd fat finger everything. You'd hear all kinds of noises, you know, clanking, and we used to hear this rattling all the time. It was a metallic, and it'd be like, what in the world is this? And this went on for a while. And then one afternoon, I was sitting out there grilling hamburgers, and I hit the grill just right. It made that noise, and my wife said, "That's the noise." And I'm like, what noise? She said, on the tapes. Do it again. I did it. She said, see, that's the noise they've been hearing. Those scutters have been licking the freaking grill, getting the grease off the grill. And so, anyway, so, that's sort of the, what was going on in the backyard. And, of course, if you tell anybody, people think you're crazy. This went on for quite a while. We tried to leave. It was interesting. If I left candy bars or stuff out for them, they wouldn't touch it. But they would take the dog food. I've had them come in, take a couple, 3 inches of dog food, but not take the candy bars. It's like, no, if you take the candy bars, you'll know it was us. So we'll just take the dog food, and that way it'll be an icky.
Yeah, and that's the thing, obviously it's eating, so it's physical. These things are physical. Obviously, it's eating the dog food. I think if that would have happened to me, it would have been, my first thought would have been, oh no, they're here. Because it's one thing to go out and look for them in the woods. It's another thing to have them on your property. You're talking apples and oranges. Yeah. What went through your mind when you realized they're on my property? Not only are they on my property, they're eating my dog food.
Yeah, well, I was apprehensive. My wife was apprehensive, but it was kind of in some ways it was neat. And you got to understand, back then I still thought, we're still morphing from the smart ape into something more's going on here. So I'm in that transition. The DNA study's going on. I'm getting preliminary stuff from people, but so I'm kind of in that transition. So at that time, when my goal is to discover them, study them, and maybe even have a conversation with one, you have these lofty goals, and, maybe someday you can do that, I don't know why I was thinking I could, but, that's what you think. I kind of thought, well, listen, as long as they don't do any, as long as they're not hurting anybody or bothering anybody, it was okay. But soon it became obvious they were messing more than just me. I mean, I may have been a catalyst, but once they got into the neighborhood, they started messing with the neighbors. I mean, through the years of research, I figured out through footprints, and I even had a couple of videos, more of eye shine, but different levels of eye shine. I figured out we had probably 4. We had a male, a female, a teenager, and an infant. Because I did get a footprint one time in blowing snow, a little 9-inch footprint. Excuse me. That was on the deck itself. And then from time to time, they used to leave their calling card single footprint. And one footprint was about 18 inches. The big male one time just left it was in dust. It was in dirt. So it wasn't very good, but it was like all it was the front part of the foot from the ball forward. So you had the ball of the foot, and you had it had the 5 toes, and it looked like it had spun, turned, and pushed off on that one foot. But the toes, measuring across the ball of the foot, it was 11 inches wide. So that's a pretty big boy. That's probably a 21-inch footprint.
Yeah, that's
if you kind of work the math out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big boy. So that's kind of the stuff. I actually got hair samples from my resident, and one of them was in the DNA study. It came back, the hair screener said, yeah, this is Sasquatch hair, and when they tested it, it was Sasquatch hair. So.
Well, and I want to come back to that. I definitely want to come back to that. I wanted to ask you, though, do you think that they followed you home, or do you think it was coincidence that just another group was in your area? Because I don't think that these things are as rare as people that the public thinks they are.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious. No. I'm just curious on your thoughts on that.
I think at the time I didn't realize I had given an invitation, but now I know that I had unwittingly given them an invitation, to come to my house, and I feel 99% sure that this group was a group from the research area, public land research area. There was an incident I have in the book during the whole visitations where they actually take some stuff out, and I've looked at it and studied it, and in my opinion, it was a message to me, but they pulled a fence post. I use fence posts to, drive them into the ground to put my ricks of wood on. I have a wood stove, and I had one in the ground that, needed to be pulled out, but I was going to wait till it rained and stuff because it was driven pretty far in the ground. Well, something pulled that out of the ground. And then they had made a cross in the backyard, and then they had put an old birdhouse. I put an old birdhouse up under the tarp where the wood was. That had been pulled out, and there was an arrow with sticks pointing in one direction. And I looked at that, and I said, this just can't be a coincidence. I cleaned up the backyard. My wife made comments saying, thank you for doing all that. I put everything up in its place. And then, a couple of days later, she said, well, someone's been out there screwing around the backyard. It's a mess, And this was laying out there. And it just hit me. I said that, the X and everything, I should get I wonder. And I went and got my compass. And that X was perfectly laid out north-south. And it was just a degree off from my compass from magnetic north, but when I went out during the night, and it was laid out perfect for the North Star. So and then, as you're kind of looking at that, so you've got a cross, and they're telling the direction. They've got an arrow pointing south. Well, that's the exact direction you would go back to the research area, and then above the arrow was the birdhouse. So, I put two and two together and said, okay, they're telling me that their home is back south. So, people would call me crazy, but that's what I interpreted from that. And,
no, I understand that. And there's nothing wrong with what you're saying. Some people might listen to that and go, well, don't you think it was maybe just a cross that was put in your yard? There's really nothing to it. But, I love hearing people's impression on what they think was going on. And I usually tell eyewitnesses, 90% of the time, if you have a certain impression, 9 times out of 10, the eyewitness is usually right. And it's a lot easier to listen to what you're saying and judge it as opposed to being there. Did they eventually leave, or what? How did they? Did you guys move?
No, I'm still here, and even to this day, I guess I need to back up and explain one thing. Throughout my research, they developed what I call their signature, okay? And their signature, I didn't even notice it at first. A friend of mine who helped me in research, Chuck Crawl, he passed, but Chuck was a good friend, and I'd bounce things off him. And he's the one that noticed it. He said, you notice all these rock pictures, they keep making this pattern, Scott. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look, you had 4 rocks and they were evenly spaced, and now there's 3 rocks together and 1 apart. Or you had 5 rocks on this thing, and, or 6 rocks, they knocked off the 2, and then they put 3 together and left 1 apart. So this 3 and 1 became a, quote, signature for this group, okay? And this 3 and 1 has shown up down there, and it's shown up at my house. One time I had put candy bars on the railing, right? I think I put 7 or 8. Go out the next morning, all the candy bars are knocked off except for 4. 3 are pushed together, 1's left alone. I put peanuts, one time I put peanuts just to, I was trying to do anything. So I put some, shelled peanuts, roasted peanuts, just a big pile of them. When I go out the next day, there's only ones left on the top of the table, or 3 pushed together and 1 by itself. And even as it's probably been about a month ago, I was getting ready to mow, and there were 4 sticks laid in a perfect vertical line in my backyard. All right, now these were sticks that fallen out of the trees, of course, but they were perfect. And there were 3 together, 6 inches apart. I measured them. And then there was 1 2 foot apart from it, but all on the exact same direct line. So, are they still visiting? Yes. And when they visit, they let me know they were here. And they don't take dog food anymore. I don't have any dogs in the backyard anymore. And so I don't keep dog food out there, and they'll just have to get over it. They don't seem, we tried, back during the heyday, we tried removing the dog food, and the house, they started banging on the side of the house, getting obviously agitated. So we put the dog food back out. I didn't want to take any chances, but it just gradually, I got divorced and remarried, and it just gradually petered out. Plus, I don't want to jump ahead, but I did pray for protection, against their intrusion, and that seemed to stop just about all of it, except for that occasional, I guess what I'd call a drive-by, hey, we're here. A couple of years ago, I found two nights in a row, 2 mornings in a row, I found a dead starling laying in the center of my driveway with its guts squished out, like something had grabbed it and popped it. And yeah, I didn't like the connotations of that, but that was about the time I realized what was going on, and I think to their chagrin, they were not happy about it. But it's kind of like leaving me a dead fish,
Was it the point to where you was a part of the DNA study? Is that what changed your mind on what these things are?
Yeah, I think the DNA study was like the last nail in the coffin. As I'm maturing in my research, the best way to say it, and I've come to the conclusion, at first they were dumb apes, and then all of a sudden they demonstrated the language thing, and then they started the home visitations, and then that, plus, I joined North American Bigfoot Search and, become part of the Sasquatch genome study. So now I'm starting to get reports from witnesses, not only my experiences, but other people's experiences. And I am starting to get experiences where, people say they talk to them, they use language, they were mimicking, M.K. Davis was starting to put out some of the stuff from the Sales Ranch in Texas, and, where they were chanting and talking, And so that coming in from one side, plus my own personal research started building up just the mountain of evidence that, hey, I'm dealing with something here that's a lot more than just a smart ape. They show intelligence. They know how to figure things out. They definitely know what technology is. They know how to avoid technology. I don't know how many times they knew instinctively that if you stood in front of an infrared camera, that it would just go off once, and then if you didn't move, it wouldn't go off anymore. And so I would have candy bars out. My camera would be tripped. 10 minutes later, it'd be tripped again, by just something standing right in front of us, just a whiteout. So it would start out as a whiteout, and the next time it would start out as a whiteout, and the whiteout would, move real quick. And then the scene, and when you're looking at the scene where your candy bars were, the candy bars were gone. And so by the time when we started getting back the results of the genome study, that it's basically, Mel was like, hey, this thing, the mitochondrial DNA is coming back human, but the nuclear DNA doesn't match anything in GenBank, and it's really odd. So she's like, look, boys, it looks like we've got a human hybrid here of some sort. So that's about that time when I had, by then I had seen one with my own eyes, looked in its eyes, and I'd seen intelligence. It wasn't like I was looking at an ape. It didn't have the face of an ape. The one I saw had the face of a person, pretty much, and just looked like a big hairy person. And so, and then plus David Pilates had done it. I got one of the reasons I actually got talking to him was the Hoopa Project, where he had the sketch, the forensic artist doing Harvey Pratt doing the sketching. He really upset the apple cart because he's like, look, I get a forensic artist that it's drawing what these people are saying they're seeing. He's not putting his own artist impression on this. He's drawing what they're seeing. And these, and here are these basically American Indian looking Bigfoot, They had one of them, a red-headed one, actually had an overbite and looked like an uncle I had. It didn't even look like it didn't look, of course, these things were, 10 foot tall.
Can I ask you something about that? So when that very first came out, I don't know if the audience is aware of that, but when that very first came out, I remember thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, I could be 100% wrong, but I remember thinking he's not every one of these things, when people see them, not everyone says they look like people. I've had people that say it looked very much like a chimpanzee, except for the nose. Everyone across the board, everyone agrees that the nose is very human, except for there is people that see him and go, it looked like a chimpanzee. I've talked to people that said it looked like an ape in the face. It looked very much like an ape in the face, except for it had a human nose. Yeah. And when I saw Harvey doing those, and he's a great artist, and I hope this comes out right, but I remember thinking at the time, like, this guy's only taking eyewitness testimony of people that say it looked human-like, that it looked like a Native American. Because if you look at a lot of the audience, probably has no clue what we're talking about, but he did a series of artist renditions, and one thing I noticed is all of them looked like a Native American. There wasn't really, he didn't have one that looked like a chimpanzee, and he didn't have one that looked like an ape. He didn't have one that. And so I don't know. I always felt like it was kind of skewed a little bit because he's not really taking the full picture. I mean, it'd be like if I put something out and every one of them looked like a chimpanzee except for a human nose. Someone might look at that and go, yeah, but that's not really what I saw. Did you get that impression from seeing those from the Hoopa project?
No, well, I think the reason that the most of, he was doing artist inceptions. What David did was a very analytical thinker. He after being he was a policeman and a detective, and then he worked for a tech company. And so David did the stick pin thing in California. Basically, what happened was real quick, short story. Basically, David was approached. He was retired. He didn't have anything to do. He was looking for something to do, to continue some sort of career. And a couple of very high-end, well-known tech people from Silicon Valley approached him. Both of them they were partners in a business, but separately as childhood, they both had Bigfoot experiences. So they knew Dave through, the company he worked with, and they asked Dave, we'll fund you to go look into this. I mean, we know it sounds crazy, but we got the money, and we really want to get to the bottom of this. Is it a hoax? With what we see real? What's the deal? And so that's what started the Hoopa Project. So he started going to California, and he started stick pinning. It's like he looked at every source he could find. And the biggest source, or the biggest glob of stick pins, was on the Hoopa Reservation, which is not too far from Bluff Creek. Okay, so he says, okay, there's where am I going? That's Bigfoot hotspot central. And so he literally, starts milling around the tribe. He puts a sticker on, gets an official hat. He gets them to trust him. I'm not some fly-by-night guy that's trying to make a dollar. I'm doing serious research. So when Harvey's doing those sketches, you got to remember he's only sketching a Bigfoot from that one area of that isolated pocket, isolated pocket, which
I got you. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
That makes
because I'm going to be honest. I mean, I'm good friends with Dave, and I know Harvey Pratt, but I've actually got photographs of one here that has the upturned nose. It actually got the nose where the nostrils are upturned. Mary Green used to get a lot of flack because the ones here in East Tennessee, when the other bigwigs in the Bigfoot world would come around, she said, well, mine are all round head. They don't have a cone head. They're round head, and they look like people. And they're like, oh, you're a crazy woman. You don't know what you're talking about. That's not what they look like. So I think the area of the country has something to do with it. I think there is crossbreeding with humans, and there's dilution. It just depends on the population where they're at, and how much crossbreeding has taken place.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you clarified that. I didn't realize it was all taken from. I thought it was several witnesses from across the United States. I didn't realize it was all.
No. All those were from that Hoopa Reservation.
Yeah, which makes more sense.
In the second book, he branched out and went to Oklahoma, and when he did Tribal Bigfoot, when Dave was trying to kind of put it all together, his second book was Tribal Bigfoot. And they spread out from Hoopa they went to Oklahoma, to Reservation in Oklahoma. Those are a little different. I mean, they're still human looking, but you can tell there's a difference in their look.
Yeah, and I've always said, from different portions of the United States, I get different reports. And I want to get into the Nephilim thing on how you came to that conclusion. Before we do, though, you had mentioned earlier you had run into one, and it looked very human-like. Do you mind telling us about that and kind of describing what you saw?
Sure. probably, I have to look up all the memories running together sometimes. So much going on. I did research it pretty heavy for about 2 years. And it really started taking the joy out of going in the woods because, whenever you go in the woods, they knew you were there and they would try to get your attention. And it was deer season. I really just wanted to go deer hunting. And the only place I needed to go, unfortunately, the best place to go was my research area. Of course, it was a different part of the research area. So I kind of got a tad bit of a late start, but I really didn't care. I just wanted to get out in the woods, get up in the tree stand with my bow, and just deer hunt and zone out. I did take my camera, but it was literally, I stuck it not. It was an afterthought, because I said, well, if I don't take my camera, then one's going to run out and stand there in my tree stand and, moon me. So I said, I'll take the camera, but I had actually had it turned off. It was in my pocket. And so I've got a tree stand on my back, a bow in my hand, and I'm heading out this, it's a pipeline that, they keep the pipeline cut. There's a, horse trail going down the middle of it. And the grass is probably armpit high on the sides of the trail, but of course you can walk down the center. So I'm walking, and I start down this hill. And, it's breaking daylight now. You can see, you pretty much see pretty good. It's probably, I should have already been in the tree stand. But I get about a quarter way down, going down this little hill, and it hits me. And I mean, it's like, oh, shit. I just knew. I said, there's one behind me. I knew it. I mean, it was the weirdest feeling. I'm like, I knew I was being watched. The hair on my back was standing up, and then I just knew it. So I turned around, and sure enough, when I turned around back up the hill where it's level, maybe 25 yards. It wasn't too far. I wasn't that far down the hill. I started seeing this little black dome coming up out of the grass. It's a little higher. And basically, this Bigfoot is raising up. He's got jet black hair and his skin's black. It's black on black as far as the skin and the hair. And, it raises up. I see it. It raises up to right, its nose exposed, and it stops about where, the grass line's about right on like its top lip. And I mean, it's, round, it's not round, it's not a full grown adult, but I'm just staring at it and it's staring at me. And it doesn't blink. It's just looking right at me. I'm looking right in its eyes. We're just looking at each other. And the weird thing was I was excited, but it wasn't like I was losing my mind like I thought it would. It was almost like, oh, crap, here we go. It was almost one of those feelings, on the one day that I really wanted to be left alone, this is going to happen. When I'm really not, it's almost like, I wasn't mentally prepared. When you go researching, get yourself psyched up, you're ready, you're looking, you're on your game, so to speak. And I was totally relaxed. I wasn't mentally prepared for this experience, so to speak. It was like, there's really no time to even get worked up. It's just, there it is, boom. And so we're looking at each other. It's the classic. It's got a flat nose, wide flat nose on the face, high cheekbones. It's got really, deep brow, but I can see its eyes, see the white, just barely see a little bit of the sclera, just a little bit of the whites of the eyes on the edges. And I'm looking, and after, I don't know how much time passed, a minute, not long, but about a minute and a half, I decide, okay, someone's got to do something. So I was going to say something. I was going to say hello. I started to form the words to go, and when I did, it's like it knew I was getting ready to talk to it. It turned and it jumped across the trail. It looked like it was in a squatted position. So it leapt up into a run from that position, if you can imagine that. So it crossed the trail, almost looked like a hurdler. You know what I'm saying? It was stretched out with one leg in front and one leg in back. It crossed the trail and was kind of hunched over. He shot across that trail. I guess the pipeline, he probably covered 10, 12 feet, like in a blink of an eye, almost like it was a cartoonish type. And he went and he ran up this trail, and it was like it was just boom, he was gone. It was like I'm not going to let you speak to me. I'm not going to listen. or I'm not, whatever you're getting ready to do, it ain't going to happen. So that was the first time I eyed one.
Yeah, it's terrifying coming face to face with these things. And I know you called it Dogman, and the Dogman video where I think you had the camera on your back and you're walking out.
That I finally figured out early in my research that whatever it is, they're not going to be in front of you, and they were peekers. They were hiding peekers. And I kind of accidentally figured this out because I was holding the camera and pointing off to the side. I really wasn't pointing it on purpose. I was just holding it, had it running, and was doing something else, and one peeked out of the bush. And so that kind of led me to, start thinking about it. So I started putting a camera on my shoulder pointing backwards. And I called it the back trail camera. And then I would basically, the whole time I'm out, I would have it, I'd stop it to cut the clips down, but I'd film the whole time. So on this Dogman capture, I kept going to the area where I'd had the infrasound experience, where I'd run out on the end of where the trail actually stops and the lake goes across. So on this day, I go to the feeding station. I mean, I know something's not right, but I can't figure out what it is, and it's one of those things. But there was some odd stuff. The Bigfoot sign was diminishing. Something was going, and I knew something was wrong, but I just couldn't figure out what it was. So, I've got the two cameras. I've always had one on a monopod, and most of the time I filmed it to the side or back too, but I had it in case something happened in front of me. And then, of course, I always had the back trail camera. So I go to the end of this point, and I'm actually zooming in and out, and I'm concentrating on this aisle, because I'm trying to make sure there's nothing on that aisle looking back at me. Well, while I'm doing this, and I'm there for 4 or 5 minutes, and then it's kind of getting time where I'm getting ready to leave. So if you can imagine, the camera's on my left shoulder pointing backwards, and I'm squared up. And I start to turn to the left. As I start to turn to the left, there's brush, very thick brush behind me. And no more than 3 or 4 feet behind me, as I start to turn my shoulder, in the video, there is a creature with his head back. And as I turn, his head comes down. And then by the time I turn my shoulders and stop moving, and the camera motion stops, he has leveled his head out and he pushes his face forward. So there's a piece of a cedar tree literally laying on top of his nose. His nose is exposed, his right eye, right ear, and right side of his face is exposed, and that's it. And so you can see him for a few seconds. And of course, I'm getting ready to keep turning around. So as I'm turning and I'm moving the shoulders, you can see he's moving. He's kind of okay. This guy's getting ready to do something. I've got to get ready. And as I continue to turn around, and you can just see him as the camera pans off of him. He kind of just squats down below my eye level where I can't see him. He doesn't run off. He's still right there. And then I pause for a moment with my front facing camera. I actually kind of pan that area, kind of like I know maybe something's around, but I just don't know. And that was always the scary part, is, with the Bigfoot, I knew they were near me and I could feel them. And with this thing, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't feel. And so then I turn around and walk off. Well, I don't know this is happening. This is on a back trail camera. I have no clue. So I go on about my day. When I get back home, usually if I had time, I'd run through my footage real quick. Well, when I'm running through this back trail footage, boom, there it is. And that literally scared me to death, because this thing is literally just right behind me. If it wants me, it's got me. It could have just, whatever it wanted to do, it could have done. And one of the oddest things on it, I noticed, is there's a little, on its right shoulder, against the side of its head, is this little entity. And the entity has a human-like looking little face, and the skin is flesh tone. And it's got a bumpy, the head is silver colored. I guess it's hair. I don't know. You can look at the video and try to figure that out for yourself. And the whole time, when I really got to analyzing this video, it is in HD, And zooming up, this little booger, his mouth is moving all the time, like making popping noises. He looks like a fish, when a fish, like a goldfish, making those opening his mouth. And that little mouth's going 90 miles a minute. He's constantly doing something. And you can actually watch, if you zoom in and slow it down, you can watch the nostrils on the Dogman are opening and closing as he's breathing.
I'll have to go back and really take a look at it. I'd love to post it to the site so the listeners could watch it. But when you sent it to me and I was watching it, I don't know about Dogman. Again, I only saw it one time, and I have an eyesight of like a 90-year-old man, but I have to go back and take a look. Yeah. But you did capture something. I mean, there is something there. It reminded me when I first looked at it, and I only looked at it right before we went on air, it kind of reminded me of like if someone would have said to me, this is a gorilla hiding in the brush in Africa, I'd have been like, okay, I can go with that. Because it's this big black head, and you're right, it does kind of dodge down as you're spinning the camera around. If I have your permission, I'd love to post it to the website.
Yeah, you can go. Yeah, that's great. Go ahead and post it. People who are more familiar. So I'm not a Dogman researcher. I never was. Okay, I literally had to create another blog to post Dogman stuff to, because the Bigfoot people lost it. Back then, it wasn't cool. We don't want to hear about Dogman. Don't talk to us about it. A DNA study was going on. David's like, see, I got this footage right in the middle of the DNA study. And David's like, God, for God's sakes, do not release the study. I mean, do not put this video out. People will lose their minds. We don't need, we're having hard enough trouble getting people to take Bigfoot seriously. Dogman's just, don't do it. I mean, nobody wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Except for Linda Godfrey, everybody else was like, oh. So I literally created a side blog, said, okay, I'll post all the stuff over here. People want to look at it. That's great. I don't research Dogman. I never have. They just kind of showed up on their own and started aggravating me. I didn't go looking for it. But I was going to look up that lady's name. Hang on one second. There was a Linda Godfrey did this story about this woman and her husband that were terrorized a group of dogmen. And she looked at my video and she said, that's the closest thing I've seen to the dogmen that terrorized us. They had the flat noses and a head shaped like that. I think her last name is Martin, Shelley Martin, and she was actually featured on a TV show one of those paranormal TV shows where they talked about their experiences and everything. But I've got her comments and stuff on my Dogman blog.
Yeah, it's one of those things to where you would think if it, whether it's related or not, we just don't know. I mean, and so why not look into like the Dogman? Because we just don't know if it's related or not. And what's interesting is, when I've said this before in the past, and I was a harsh critic of the Dogman until I started talking to witnesses, and I found the same thing with witnesses who've run into this Dogman. They're very consistent across the board on what they're seeing. I mean, they're just as consistent as, it's less common than running into Sasquatch, but the people that do run into Dogman, they're very consistent. And so as all of this went on and your research went on, you came to the conclusion that these are Nephilim?
Yes. I'm a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. And, so my world, I have a biblical worldview. So, that's something that, your listeners need to know. I mean, some people don't believe in God. Some do. Some, different types of religions or whatever. So, I believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God, and I believe it's inerrant. And I believe that books like Enoch and Jasher, these books they're not scripture, but since they're referenced by the Bible, they're kind of biblically endorsed, because Jesus or the Bible itself quotes from them or references them. So as I'm getting deeper into my research, and, we get the DNA study back, and, all right, so now I've gone from it's a smart ape to it's a human hybrid. But then, we start having these supernatural things, and I don't, I'm saying supernatural to say there are things that human beings can't do. Okay, these are things that we don't have the ability, or we don't have the technology or the knowledge to do. Because I'm sure what some of the stuff we do to someone 300 years ago would seem like we're supernatural, right? So I use that word to say that these things were happening that I couldn't understand, or I couldn't, put a finger on. I've got footage, and I actually saw one or some. I mean, I guess I can't say it was a Bigfoot because it was cloaked, but something was cloaked. And when I mean cloaked, I mean it was moving through the woods, and it was almost like it was just like looking at the Predator movie. And it had the shape and general form of what you would consider a Bigfoot. I had orbs. I was sitting on my back porch and got photographs with my iPhone of orbs, and in one photo, there's 3 orbs moving in 3 different directions. So it's not a lens flare. That happened. Twice I got pictures of orbs on my back porch. The showing up at my house without really any, there's just no way. I wouldn't buy them. They were smelling me here. The single footprints, you'd have a situation where you'd have dust everywhere, but there'd be a single footprint right in the center of it. And you're like, well, how did he get in and get out without leaving another footprint? These are the things. The mind speak stuff started, they were trying to talk to me telepathically, and I never had any of that. I just said no. I refused to even allow it to happen. I mean, I got some migraines from it, but, I know other friends of mine have let them do the mind speak, but I won't allow them to do it. I just said no. Even before I, thought that, in my opinion, came to the conclusion they were Nephilim, I don't know, there was just something wrong about it. I don't know how else to explain it. So, these supernatural things, plus other people, I'm helping people, we take calls from people that need help. And we had this one situation where this one woman it was a last resort. We actually told her to pray and read your Bible out loud, because we had actually tried everything else with this woman. She was being, seriously harassed by the things. They were shaking her trailer and being very threatening. And me being the Christian, I said, try this. All we know to do is try it. And it worked. She went outside and she prayed. Still don't want you to come out anymore. She sat on her front porch and she, out front, and she read out the Bible out loud, and they wouldn't come around anymore. As far as, they would be on the outskirts, but they didn't attack her trailer anymore. So, these sort of experiences, and then I continued my research, because it's kind of like, once the DNA study was done, we felt like, okay, we proved it. People don't believe it, but that's their problem. We wrapped this bad boy up, put a little bow on top of it. The Bigfoot is a human hybrid. We're done. So, I'm kind of, that research is kind of over, so to speak. Dave goes on to his 411 books, and, other than doing helping people out and taking eyewitness reports, I start, that's when I start looking into some of the other things. I start noticing, the elongated skull, we're finding elongated skulls, and I see some of these pictures of these elongated skulls, and I say, well, that's funny. That kind of looks like the head of a Bigfoot, and it's supposed to be an elongated skull. And then all of a sudden you start seeing reports, elongated skull, paramagnum goes to the very back of the skull. It doesn't go to the center. That's where the spinal column, instead of going to the center of the skull, goes to the back, and then it's 25% larger, so it's not cradle boarding. And people like L.A. Marzulli and some of these other people, I start researching their work. And, of course, they're researching the Nephilim and these elongated skull things, and all of a sudden their DNA comes back exactly like the DNA from the Sasquatch study. It had a human woman as the female progenitor, unknown male. Here's an interesting thing I did in my book is L.A. Marzulli got the haplotypes from some of was able to get the haplotypes from some of the elongated skulls in South America, and they all pointed back to the area, the Mid-East area. Because, and guess what? Many of the Bigfoot that we got their haplotypes go right back to the Mid-East area. So, there's another common thread. So it was just from the study of that, I started reading Enoch, the eyewitness reports, it just one thing led to another, and I finally just standing there and I said, these things match exactly what the Bible called the giants, except they're hairy. and that's kind of when that was my, that's kind of when I got into my aha moment. I think, and I recount this in the book. I mean, one of the things that really put me over the top was an episode I was with Greg Guradic, and we had gone in, and we had done a day, and nothing much had really happened. We were walking back out in the Great Smoky Mountains. We were walking back out the trail, and I intended to try this experiment, and if this was a good time to do it, I was with someone, because I really wanted to make sure, could these things understand me, these things know what was going on. They kind of demonstrated they already knew what technology was, and they could disable it. So, you put a camera in the woods, they're going to find it, and they're going to disable it. I mean, period. And anybody wants to argue me at that point, I'll argue all day long because I can prove it, because ain't nobody got a picture of me. It's worth a hoot, right? So there you go. So we're walking on our way out. He's got a digital voice recorder he's recording on. I'm recording with my back trail camera. And I told him, I said, on the way out, I'm going to start talking just like really bad about them. I said, I'm going to start putting them down. I'm going to start saying, very bad things. I'm going to call them out. I'm going to make fun of them. Excuse me. So that's what I start doing. And we're about maybe a quarter mile away from the parking lot. And I'm giving them down the road, saying stuff like, well, these Bigfoot, they're a bunch of pansies, they won't show, they're afraid of us. That's why they won't show themselves. They ain't got the gut, they're just full of crap, being pretty verbally abusive. And so as we're walking, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm in the middle of one of my rants. We're walking a trail. To the right of us is a creek and then a very steep hill with laurel thicket. On the left is a rock face, goes 10 or 12 feet tall up, and then it goes up a hill real steep. So the rock face is to our left, creek, and then right across the creek is thicket. I get hit with something, and all I can describe it is it was like as a boy running around the country, every now and then you'd be stupid enough to grab a electric fence. And so that's what it felt like. And it hit me on the left side, and it ran up the right side, it ran up my right arm, across my chest, and then out my left arm. And it hit me like it was like a thud. It hit me hard. I stumbled. I almost went down. And it addled me, and it really hit me hard. And it hurt. It was no other way to say it. It hurt. This was painful. It's like getting tased, I guess. I've never been tased by a taser, but it hurt. And I'm like, oh God, and I stumbled, and Greg kind of reached over and grabbed me. You all right? I said, yeah. I said, did you feel that? And he said, no, but he said, I heard a whoosh go by my face about the same time you stumbled. And we looked around. Once I got my composure, we filmed, we looked, we couldn't find anything, couldn't make anything else happen. So we go on home. He says, well, when I get that DVR stuff up, I'll send you a snippet there. And so on my video, the camera, there's a little bit of a pop on my camera. You can hear the pop. It's like you can hear like some sort of noise, but you really can't make it out. But his DVR really got an interesting recording. At the time I got hit, you can hear this pop. It's an audible pop, and then there's a crackle after it. So it's a pop, and then like a crackle. And the interesting thing was when I got up in the morning, you got to go to the bathroom. While I went to urinate, there was quite a bit of blood in my urine. It was a scary amount of blood. And so I called him up, and I said, did you get that snippet ready? He said, yeah, I'm going to email it to you. And I said, I hate to ask this, but I got to. I said, when you got up this morning, did you have urine in your blood? And he says, yeah, I was going to ask you if you had urine in your blood. And I said, yeah, I had urine in my blood. So, this is that. Of course, the Bigfoot researchers will call that zapping. And it's not a nice thing. It's not a good thing. Yeah. And, but, fortunately, that, the blood cleared up. That was the only time. Was that the first thing in the morning, and then the next time everything was clear. But, that had a physical effect on both of us. Even though he didn't actually get hit with it as hard as I did, he still had urine in his blood, or blood in his urine, excuse me. And, this was and there's no doubt this was in direct response to what I was doing. There's no doubt in my mind. So, then that kind of was like, okay, the gig is up, guys. You understood me in English. You got angry, and you responded appropriately, and you lashed out and hurt me. And at that point, it was kind of like everything just laid in place. They're not smart apes. They're human hybrids or more. And I'm not, they know English for sure, along with whatever other languages. And so that was kind of the moment when I realized this is not, what I'm dealing with here is not normal. I'm not buying this whooping and this rock clacking crap anymore. If you want to bang on trees, you can do that for the finding Bigfoot guys. They'll eat that crap up. But I just, consciously, I'm like, I'm not buying it anymore. I kind of came to the conclusion that a lot of this stuff they do is probably just, literally, they're just messing with us. Okay? They're trying to confuse us. They're trying to disorient. They're trying to get you off the track of what they really are. Because the hoops and wood knots have a communications long distance, and it does. But a lot of this stuff's just for show. I really do believe a lot of this crap they do is just for show. They're just, they're human enough to have a sense of humor and want to mess with people.
Yeah.
I think that's what they do. I think sometimes that's what they do. They literally are just screwing with you.
Yeah, and you hear that a lot from a lot of witnesses, and I know it's getting late. And there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I definitely have to have you back on the show, Scott.
Sure.
The book again, and I've just started reading it. It's actually a really good book. I can appreciate good writing because I'm terrible at it. And so when you're terrible at something and you see someone else who's actually pretty good at it, you tend to respect it. But the book again is called The Nephilim Among Us: The Identity and Origin of Sasquatch and Other Mysterious Creatures. It'll be on Amazon, and I'll put links in here for the ebook's actually really cool. That's what I'm reading is the ebook, and that's what I recommend people get. Go ahead, Scott.
No, I was saying, the ebook, I'm able to put more pictures in it, and you can zoom pictures up. If you want choppy, you can take it to Kinko's and have them, print it off. You were talking earlier that, I did come out with a paperback version, and that was more just because I had a good number of people request it. I said, well, it's going to be more expensive. And they're like, we don't care. I'd rather have a book in hand. So, they're kind of old school. So, it is in paperback. But like I said, the e-version, the ebook is obviously more economical and in my opinion, a little bit easier because you can zoom in. You can go print it. The pictures, in PDF, you can zoom in and look at things and take your time with it. It's when you I know you're aware when you try to put even high def pictures in it and print them in a book, you lose so much unless the book's just almost unreasonably expensive. But yeah, if they go to I've got a blog site called the Nephilim Among Us .blogspot.com. There'll be a link there to both books and both the ebook version and the right now it's on the book. It should be the Amazon people. It takes 5 to 7 days. It's been about 5 days since I actually published. Officially clicked the button with Create Space and published it. People can also go to www.createspace.com, and it's 6594754 is the reference number. If you / and put that after it, it'll take you to a little page where you can buy. If you want to buy the hard, paperback, you can. I've got blogs. I've got the Bigfoot Field Journal blog, and then I've got called it the Dogmen Monsters Are Real blog, where I stuck all my Dogman stuff on if people are interested in that. And my ebooks, if you want to go directly to my ebooks, it's sellfy.com / Scott Carpenter, SCOTT. Carpenter, all one word. And you can download, you PayPal it, download it, and of course, if you have any trouble with the download, some people sometimes have trouble. Just email me, and I'll make sure you get the book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'll put all the links in below, but I'll definitely have to have you back. And Scott, I appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your experiences. I know some of them are kind of, for the audience listening, it's kind of odd, it's kind of weird. But if it's the truth and what happened to you, and you're not the first to say this kind of stuff. That's the thing I want to remind the audience is you're definitely not the first to say this. I've had witnesses on that have said this, and I've talked to a lot of witnesses privately. And so for me, it's kind of like, well, what is this thing? And I've thought about them being the Nephilim, but in my mind, I just don't know. But the book is definitely a good read, and I highly recommend everyone get yourself a copy. And Scott, thanks again, man.
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it. Now, anytime you want me to come back on, just let me know. I'd be glad to do it. There's more to cover. I could talk quite a while about all the different experiences over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Scott. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
Sleep.